Hello and a very warm welcome to Granada Reports.
Yeah, good evening. Here's what's coming up on tonight's programme.
I'm sat here with a black eye. You're telling me you're going to batter me?
I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered.
The voice of the former kickboxer who battered, bit and bruised his pregnant girlfriend. Now Becca faces the terrifying prospect of his release from prison after serving 11 months of a 2-year sentence.
But now that obviously I know the date that he's coming out, I'm constantly checking how many days away it is. I'm having nightmares again, flashbacks, I'm avoiding going places. It's the fear of the unknown.
In the wake of the Southport murders, another government promise to crack down on children buying knives online. Will it work?
Who next for the Bolton hot seat after the sacking of manager Ian Evatt, while City might be sending an SOS if they don't beat PSG in the Champions League tonight.
And we're expecting our 5th named storm of the season, Storm Aowen, on Friday. We have an amber warning in place for wind. I'll have all the details later on in the programme.
Well, first tonight, and a warning about a very upsetting story. A young mother fearing for her life after being subjected to a campaign of domestic abuse by her boyfriend, a former mixed martial arts fighter.
Yeah, you may remember we reported Becca Smith's case last year when she told us about the domestic violence she suffered at the hands of Carl Draper. That included him repeatedly assaulting her while she was pregnant with their baby.
Well, he was jailed for 2 years after admitting 6 counts of assault and coercive control, but just 11 months on, he's about to be released.
Draper was hit with a 5-year restraining order, which means he can't make any contact with her during that time. But Becca says unless he's excluded from Merseyside, where she lives, it's inevitable she'll bump into him.
I'm sat here with a black eye. You're telling me you're going to batter me?
I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered.
How do you feel when you hear that back?
I can hear him saying it over and over again. It's horrendous.
For 3 years, Becca was left battered, bruised and belittled at the hands of Carl Draper, the man who supposedly loved her.
So it started with just pushing, shoving, name-calling, and then by the time I was pregnant, he was strangling me, leaving me with black eyes, bites, bruises.
Just a week after bringing their new baby boy home, he split open the scar of her C-section.
So I came back from the hospital and within a matter of days he'd split my caesarean scar open with an assault.
So when did you decide enough was enough and you went to the police?
When the abuse started happening around the baby, I couldn't take it anymore. And then I left the relationship and I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Like, he started climbing in through my window, threatening to take his own life. It was just absolutely horrendous.
Last year, Carl Draper was jailed for 2 years for 6 counts of assault and coercive control. He pleaded guilty, and Becca made the brave decision to stand up in court and face him to read out her victim impact statement.
I knew that in court I'd be safe, and I also knew after being silent for 3 years that I'd be able to speak and let not only Carl but the rest of the world know what I'd actually been through. So I done it. I stood up in court, faced them eye to eye and read out what I'd been through.
But just 11 months into his sentence, Becca's now having to prepare for his release.
So 3 years of torture, my life is worth 11 months of justice.
And how do you feel about that?
It's just the laws in the UK, like, where violence against women are so outdated. And if I were to be assaulted in the street 6 times by a stranger, strangled, had a caesarean scar split open, would they have only got 11 months? They wouldn't have. But because it happens in the home, it's normalised.
How worried are you that you might end up bumping into him? Because I guess this is his hometown as well, isn't it?
It's inevitable that if an exclusion zone isn't implemented, that I will bump into him.
And what does that make you feel?
I'm petrified. But now that obviously I know the date that he's coming out, I'm constantly checking how many days away it is. I'm having nightmares again, flashbacks, I'm avoiding going places. It's the fear of the unknown.
Last week, the case of Kienna Dawes was in the spotlight. The young mum took her own life after she too suffered years of physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her so-called partner. Like Kienna, Becca also documented the trauma she'd suffered. And last weekend, like thousands of other people across the country, Becca marched to highlight the issue of violence against women.
This is the poster I've made for the Women's March to say I stand with Kiana Dawes. Because in her suicide note she did say that she hopes her case changes and saves the lives of other women. And I really do believe it will.
When you've been through what you've been through and you see a case in the news like Kiana's, it must just bring everything back.
Yeah, it's been really triggering for me, to knowing that it could have been me and it will be other women.
Well, thank you so much to Becca for being so brave and talking to us about her ordeal. A little earlier, we spoke to Vicky McLean, a specialist in domestic violence, about her story.
We asked her about her first interactions with people who've suffered domestic violence once they've made the decision to seek help.
They're very frightened when they speak to me, although, as I always say to them, they've already taken a massive step by actually reaching out and looking for help and having that conversation. But they're frightened. They're frightened that if they take steps to try and protect themselves, actually, if those aren't successful, the consequences could make things even worse. You know, it's so positive that they are reaching out, and I try to make that the main message that I say to them, and that there are things that we can do and we can help them.
Obviously, in Becca's case, it ended in conviction, but his jail term is coming to an end. She's obviously worried, despite having a restraining order, that she could bump into him in the shops, you know, at the bus stop as she's going for a walk. How worrying is that for those who've survived?
It's extremely worrying, and it seems so incredibly wrong. I was talking to my daughter about the case this morning. She's 19, and she was horrified at the thought that after only 11 months, Becca could be facing the prospect of, you know, going into town, to her hometown, and coming face to face with the man that had just committed such absolutely horrific harm towards her, and where there's a restraining order which will stop him contacting her, but that doesn't prevent the situation where they might bump into each other, which just must be so frightening.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, isn't it? You know, there'll be many people who will be listening to Becca's case and think that when it comes to victims of domestic violence, victims of abuse, the law is acting against them, but surely there must be systems and measures in place that are there and that do exist in order to protect these victims. Can you just give us a sense of what they are?
Yeah, there are, and absolutely. I mean, I'm a solicitor, but I'm also a woman, and I'm a mother, and, you know, when you hear about these sentences, then it does seem incredibly unfair, but the message that I would very much want to share and to anybody who's been a victim of abuse or is currently suffering or knows someone that is suffering is that there is help out there. It's not perfect, it's improving, and people like Becca speaking out and raising awareness around these issues is so important in terms of bringing about change and improving things, but there are systems in place.
And there is a new law coming in that's linked to domestic violence, isn't it? Just tell us a little bit about that.
So in Manchester we're trialling a scheme whereby third parties, so family, friends, social workers, can actually make applications on behalf of people who are suffering from abuse. They can go to the courts and they can get orders on behalf of the victims, which will to put in place protective measures, which can include these exclusion zones that I know obviously Becca was concerned about and wanting to have in place. So it's just so positive, because so often, as I was saying, you know, the victims, when they come first forward, they're frightened. They may feel too frightened to take any steps to protect themselves. So it's a real step forward.
Some really good advice there. Thanks so much, Vicky McLean.
OK, thank you.
Well, next tonight, and some more distressing news, I'm afraid. The trial started of 8 men accused of grooming and raping 2 teenage girls in Rochdale.
The defendants, all Asian men from Rochdale, Oldham and Manchester, are accused of targeting the 2 girls when they were aged 13 in the early 2000s.
Our reporter, Tim Scott's been at the trial for us, where the prosecution have opened the case.
Prosecutor Rossano Scarmadella KC got proceedings in this trial off to a start today. It's a trial which could take up to 3 months to conclude. The 8 men in this case are charged with a number of offences. They include rape, indecency with a child, controlling child prostitution and procuring a female under the age of 21 to indulge in illegal sexual intercourse. The offences are alleged to have happened between 2001 and 2007. Most of the men involved are from Oldham or Rochdale and worked either as taxi drivers or at Rochdale Market. They're alleged to have committed the offences against 2 girls who were just 13 years old when the alleged offences began. Mr. Scarmadella described the two girls as sex slaves, and he described the men in the dock as predators. He said the two children were passed around for sex, abused, degraded and then discarded. He said that both girls had come from extremely troubled backgrounds and were extremely vulnerable. He said the men preyed on that vulnerability and used the girls for their own sexual gratification. Plied with drink and drugs, they were forced to have sex with multiple men in filthy flats, cars, alleyways and disused warehouses. One of the girls gave birth to the child of one of her abusers when she was just 14 years old. Despite social services knowing that the girls were sleeping with older Asian men, they didn't inform police and nothing was done at the time. All 8 defendants have pleaded not guilty to all of the charges, and the trial will continue here at Minchell Street Crown Court tomorrow.
Tim Scott's reporting there. Well, in other news today, Greater Manchester Police have discontinued its criminal investigation into the disappearance of teenager Alex Batty, who was missing abroad for 6 years. Alex went missing aged 11 after his mother, who was not his legal guardian, took him on a pre-arranged trip to Spain in 2017 with his grandfather. He was discovered in France in 2023. The force says Alex and his family did not support a prosecution.
Well, next, and promises by the government to stop children buying knives online.
Yes, the Prime Minister says he is determined to end what he called the shockingly easy access to them. It comes after revelations that Axel Rudakabana, when aged 17, killed 3 girls and injured several others with a knife he'd purchased from Amazon.
Well, it almost goes without saying that knife crime campaigners from our region are sceptical and say so much more will need to be done. Our political correspondent Leisha McNally now reports.
2 clicks were all it took to buy the knife that did this. The knife that devastated a community and ended 3 young lives long before their time. Alice, Bibi and Elsie were murdered by a teenager with a weapon he'd bought on Amazon.
My heart just breaks. Now, we have got to stop knife crime. Any online company, Amazon included, would want to work with the government to make sure that knives don't get into the wrong hands. So we need to go further, and the government will bring forward any measure that we need to stop the flow of knives.
But calls to change the online marketplace have come many times before. It's been 5 years since a Granada Reports investigation exposed how easy it was to buy knives over the internet. Using a debit card any 16-year-old could apply for, we acquired 3 potentially deadly weapons in just a few minutes after websites failed to carry out the legal age checks.
All delivered like any harmless package. 2, including this machete, were sent to a parcel drop box with no need to show any ID. And this one was simply dropped off on a doorstep.
5 years later, it seems too little has changed. Axel Rudakabana was just 17 when he made his fatal purchase. Amazon tell us they've launched an urgent investigation and checked the age of anyone trying to buy a knife at checkout and at delivery. But now the government wants to go even further, demanding buyers submit 2 forms of ID, like a passport or driving licence, and record a live video to verify their identity.
Technology is there to stop it, and we're going to take action.
But this boxing coach warns the fight against knife crime is not just online. Lee Holmes runs a campaign that keeps kids out of street gangs and says more awareness is vital.
We need to look at education, and from the education, what I mean is not just the youth of today, but the parents, the retailers. Everybody has a part to play.
The new proposals are being fast-tracked into the Police and Crime Bill this spring. But this former Police and Crime Commissioner for Lancashire says it's officers' powers that need strengthening too.
It does mean stop and search. It does mean making arrests. It does mean getting out there and targeting people who they think are carrying knives and pursuing them. And that needs the government to back them when they get it right, and sometimes when they get it wrong, because it won't always go smoothly.
Meanwhile, the Southport killer is due to be sentenced tomorrow. Another step towards closure for a grieving community. Leisha McNally, ITV News.
Right, well, it's time now for a look at what's coming up next on the ITV News. Here's Mary.
Coming up on the ITV Evening News, a good day for Prince Harry as he settles his legal action against News Group newspapers. The Rupert Murdoch-owned publisher apologises and is set to pay out an 8-figure sum. Guilty, a 26-year-old man changes his plea and admits to murdering his ex-girlfriend, her sister and their mother in their family home. And they are the awards that nobody in Hollywood wants to win. Find out who's been nominated for the Golden Raspberries. Would you join me for those stories and more at 6:30?
Can you imagine being a director of a film and like knowing that it's really, really rubbish, and like for a whole year in the run-up to the Golden Raspberries, you're like, please don't let me get a Golden Raspberry.
You'd have to own it, wouldn't you, and just say yes.
Yeah, hit me with it, make it hurt. OK, on to sport now, and a must-win Champions League match for City. Hello, Chris.
Yeah, City don't want the sporting equivalent of the Golden Raspberry and getting knocked out of the Champions League early. It seems unthinkable, doesn't it? But with 2 games left, defeat wouldn't knock City out of the Champions League just yet. Losing to Paris Saint-Germain tonight would drop Manchester City out of the Champions League playoff places, though. They haven't won any of their last 3 European matches, but they're unbeaten since Christmas in all competitions and have scored 20 goals in their last 4 matches, helped by Erling Haaland, who's back in form, fresh from signing that 9.5-year contract, which seemed long even to him.
Yeah, of course, it's a bit unusual. It's not normal, and that's also something I like. I feel like home. I feel so happy. My family is so happy. I think in the end that's what I wanted.
Of course, we could not expect when we arrived to be in that position. We have to accept it. If at the end we don't qualify, accept that we were not good enough. Sport is simple as that. There are other competitors, contenders that sometimes they are better or we're not better, and accept it and move forward.
Well, a City scrap for a place in the playoff round. Liverpool have already booked their place in the last 16.
Or high in the league table because they had a lucky draw, or some teams are low because they had a very difficult draw. So it's far off to say that it's an advantage to be 1 or 2. We still don't. For me, is the most important thing for tonight is that we've managed to skip around.
Well, ahead of their Europa League match against Rangers tomorrow, Manchester United boss Ruben Amorim says he was not blaming the players when he called the current team the worst in the club's history. His comments came after the defeat to Brighton last weekend left the club 13th in the Premier League table. Today he pointed the finger at himself, but was quick to add that the players should share the responsibility too.
What I was saying is that you have to look really hard to find the team of Manchester United in 10 games that lose 7 games. In that is on me, because it's the same players doing worse with a new coach. That's my only concern in the moment. But I'm not taking anything from the players.
Well, in other football news today, Ian Evatt says Bolton Wanderers needed a change after leaving his role as manager. Another defeat last night left them 9th in the League One table, and Evatt left the club soon afterwards. Evatt had been in charge since 2020 and led Bolton to promotion from League Two, as well as EFL trophy success at Wembley 2 years ago. In last night's other matches, Preston boss Paul Heckingbottom was sent off for using foul and abusive language. He was shown the red card in the tunnel at half-time at Watford, but Preston went on to win the game 2-1. Elsewhere, there were defeats for Blackburn and for Wigan, but Fleetwood Town were 2-1 winners at home to MK Dons. And a bit of transfer news to end on. Manchester City women have signed Brazilian forward Caroline. The 25-year-old Olympic silver medalist joins from American side North Carolina Courage on a 3.5-year contract. Caroline was the most valuable player in the National Women's Soccer League in 2023. And tonight, City have the small matter of the Manchester derby in the quarter-finals of the Women's League Cup. United beat them 4-2 in the Women's Super League on Sunday, so City very much out for revenge tonight.
Oh, I do love a good derby, though.
Absolutely, the atmosphere is always great, and especially between the two women's teams, it's really growing that rivalry between them now.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Chris.
Finally tonight, congratulations to Alan and Kathleen Guy from Lean, Greater Manchester, who are celebrating 50 years of marriage by going on holiday every month this year.
We are not jealous. They're kicking off their travels by revisiting Magaluf in Spain, where they had their honeymoon in 1975. Their itinerary also includes Rhodes, Antalya and the Canaries, with some cruises thrown in as well. So they'll be on their jollies at some point in every month in 2025.
Yeah, as you say, not jealous at all. Here's Joe.
Dad, we need a shower. I've been out in the rain.
The faster you go, the sooner you'll be out. You'll save water too.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Thank you. A very good evening too. It really is the calm before the storm today. On Friday, our 5th named storm of the season, Storm Eowyn, a deep low pressure system, will bring gale force winds to the north of England. And we have an amber warning in place, valid for the entire day. Friday, we'll see some disruption with damaging gusts of wind and perhaps some heavy rain to start the day as well. It's a deep low pressure system moving up from the southwest across the UK to start Friday, eventually moving northwards, eastwards and away. But behind it, more heavy rain to end this weekend. By the end of the week, the north of England will be seeing some very heavy rainfall and at times damaging gusts of wind are likely. Back to this evening, relatively quiet in comparison. A few showers feeding through, mist and fog forming up on higher ground in the Pennines and the Lakeland Fells, and temperatures dipping away low enough for a touch of frost for rural parts of Cumbria, Cheshire and Derbyshire tonight. On to tomorrow, the sun will be up at 8:11, setting at 4:35 tomorrow afternoon. For the northwest of England tomorrow, a bit of a slow start, mistiness, a bit of fog here and there. Skies could be bright for a time, but very quickly cloud will build. Rain moves in through the middle part of the day and it will be heavy with lots of surface water and spray on the roads, accompanied by squally winds and a bit of a wintry element up on higher ground as well. 6 or 7 Celsius will feel cold, even with any brightness behind that rain moving in. And then our focus through the first part of Friday will be those very strong and potentially damaging gusts of wind, hence the amber warning from the Met Office, valid for the whole day. Do take care if you have to get out and about. Things will improve by the time we get to Saturday. Bye-bye for now.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think after 50 years of marriage, they deserve a break and a medal.
Yeah. How would Mr. Alderman do?
If he chipped off at 40.
Bye-bye.